part of worshiping, the most defective part of worshiping demigods is that it creates a definite conception of pantheism, ending disastrously in many religious sects, detrimental to the progress of the principles of the Bhagavatam, which alone can give the accurate direction of self-realization in eternal relation with the personality of Godhead by devotional service in transcendental love. The example of the boat disturbed by whirling wind is suitable in this respect. The diverted mind of the pantheist can never reach the perfection of self-realization due to the disturbed condition of the selection of objects. So the position of the living entity, their natural position, their relationship with the Lord, then is that of servant, as Prabhupada has mentioned here. Eternal relationship with the personality of Godhead means he is the person. By devotional service, right, means the activities that are being used, the knowledge and skills, in transcendental love. Right, so it's a relationship with the Lord, eternal relationship, so that means then it has to be on the transcendental platform. It's not a temporary that I need something, so I strike up the relationship with the Lord and ask him this and that, and then when I get what I want, I don't continue that relationship. Right? And then maybe again later something comes up, then again you understand? So it's eternal relation. Right? So self-realization is where we establish ourselves on the spiritual platform. Then in a relationship, eternal relationship with the Lord, as a person, not as God, but as a person. Because God is the one who supplies, does all this stuff. The person is who he is in his interest. Because then that you can have a relationship based on devotional service, right, and transcendental love. If we're just seeing him as God, then the whole point is that's the creator, main destroyer. Then what is the relationship we're looking at? We're looking at some benefit that we'll get. We're not looking at the relationship with him. You understand? So that's the point, is God is who he is, but the point is he's a person who is God. So you have to have the relationship with the person. Transcendental devotional service means the activities that will be applied, right? The secondary aspects in transcendental love. That's the main aspect. So this transcendental love in relationship with the personality of Godhead expressed through devotional service, right? Situated on the position of self-realization. That is the whole process. Does this make sense? Are we able to distinguish this, or it's too early in the morning and the stomach's empty and the brain's not working? Any of those? All of the those? None of the above?
Can you just repeat it?
Repeat it. Means you have a few aspects. You have the position of self-realization, that we understand we're the soul, Krishna's God, we're not God, like that. So that situates us on the transcendental platform instead of on the material. But that's just our existence, right? That's the Sat aspect. And then within that, then the actual point is the eternal relationship with the Lord, right? So eternal means it has to be actually based on the transcendental interaction. It can't be based on material interaction, right? Because we can interact with God, since he's connected with everything, based on our material desire.
And that's not love.
Yeah, so this is meaning eternal relationship means it has to be based on transcendental love. Right? Then it's with the personality of Godhead, not just the personality of Godhead. Means he's Godhead, means he's God, and of God, then Godhead means the source of all manifestations of his godness. But the point is he's the personality, right? So they're all persons, but that supreme personality, which is the origin of all the various features of the Lord's manifestation, right? That's then what we're dealing with here. And so then by devotional service, that relationship will be expressed to the Lord through devotional service. That means we're using some particular activities, right? But the activities are generic activities. So then that's done in transcendental love. Otherwise, you can do the devotional activities not based on the eternal relationship and not necessarily on the platform of self-realization, or on the self-realization but without the eternal relationship. Does that make sense? Means you can be on the self-realized platform but not actually understand the eternal relationship with the Lord. Right? You can be liberated but not understand the transcendental relationship.
So liberation is just who we are. We're soul, Krishna is God, and...
Yeah, that's the natural position of the living entity. Yeah, it's just...
You can understand that, but not these other two.
Yes, that's only the Lord will reveal. Because we can understand, even in material consciousness, we're not the body, we're the soul. That's why you can go in and explain to somebody and give them examples, and the standard one. You say my hand, not I hand. So my head, so it's all yours. So who's you that owns all this? That kind of thing. They can catch that. They can actually have that understanding of self-realization. But then devotional service is another thing. I mean, that prema is another thing. Now, that prema is expressed through devotional service. Means it's service that's being done in the mood of devotion. Right? Because the service itself is going to be proper religious activities. This is the whole problem that's come up. Right? So Vyasadeva is described the Supreme Lord. You're starting off at the top, the Supreme Lord. Then you're coming down that the Supreme Lord, the relationship of the living entity with him based on prema, right? And the natural activities. Now when you come down, then the thing is, okay, what are all these various activities in all varieties of ways, since Krishna is everything. So he describes all that. But the problem is that people aren't, unless it's presented directly from the top down, the people looking at it from the bottom up are just going to see all these varieties of methods. Right? That's what he said. The diverted mind of the pantheist can never reach the perfection of self-realization. Right? The perfection of self-realization. They can understand they're not the body, the soul, but perfection means the relationship with the Lord. Due to disturbed condition of the selection of object. Right? In other words, they're selecting an object to perform worship through. But they're distracted by that object. Yes.
Does that object become a primary?
Means, yes, that's what happens, is it becomes reversed, as the secondary becomes the primary for them, and then Krishna is added on to that, whatever purpose is there. So then, because they're coming up from their material desires, then it's going to be something to do with karma, gyan, and mystic siddhis, or all these different things. And so they get distracted by the secondary. And so they don't actually know what to do. So that's what Narad Muni is pointing out, is that you as a, great scholar, that you know everything. You've described everything. But the problem is you haven't described it in such a way that the living entities can take advantage of it.
So people can be doing devotional service, offering arati labs, but really not having a clue.
Yes.
Loving Krishna.
Yes. But, see, here we're making a distinction between based on Bhagavatam and not. So here this is about not, because like what you're giving is the same position, but someone's doing the arti because of their connection with the Parampara and the Bhagavatam. So they're doing it because they know this is the appropriate thing to do. Though their consciousness may be thinking about, what they're cooking for breakfast, and do they have all the things, and they forgot to pick this up, so then how do we go? But then now the traffic is there, so we'll have to go around this way, and all that's going on while you're waving around. But the point is they're there doing that devotional service because of the ultimate intent of developing love for Krishna. So it's still progressive. They won't be bewildered, they'll be distracted. Right? So here is that the non-devotees, they're distracted by these secondary aspects and that, but they're also bewildered. Because, as he mentioned here, what do you call it? Different ways. Describe transcendental realization in different ways, namely by fruitive activities, speculative knowledge, mystic power, and devotional service. So they can all give transcendental realization. They can all bring you up to the point of liberation. But if you do these activities with the proper understanding and proper detachment, it means you can perform your karma activities that the results are not for yourself. They're because you're supposed to do them and you're not attached. That will bring you to the neutral position or liberation. But you perform the activities, they're not for you, they're for Krishna, then it takes on the devotional. But otherwise, the form of liberation is the same for all platforms. It's just you have a variety of activities, just like the principles of cooking apply to all vegetables. But if you apply that principle, it will work. And if you don't, it won't work. Does that make sense? But at the same time, it's only when you're doing it to please Krishna, then it takes on that devotional and transcendental position. Yes, it's always the intent. But you see, as the technique is there. So what he's done is he's very nicely, in detail, described all the techniques. But people get bewildered by the description of the techniques and forget about the actual ultimate purpose, which is Krishna. Because there's so much detail and technique. They get lost in it, yeah. So that's why then Narad Muni is pointing out as your presentation is not going to be successful. Because people will just become bewildered by all that. So the point is unless you give the presentation of Srimad Bhagvatam, that presentation, then they won't get bewildered because they'll know it's just about serving Krishna. Then the detail that's there is the knowledge by which they'll perform the devotional service. You understand?
All the other knowledge that Upanishads, etc., that's all bewildering.
It's bewildering unless you see it in context of Bhagavatam. Yes, it is, because the living entity is trying to come up. But the knowledge is descending. So you have to start with Krishna and that love for Krishna, and then that's expressed through devotional activities. Right? And that means then you're situated on that transcendental position in a transcendental, eternal relationship with the Lord. Right?
So that you shouldn't really go into the detail until I understand the bigger
The principle, yes.
to get to the conversation of number one.
So that's the thing, you're balancing that. You find what kind of mood, presentation that they're comfortable with. Through that, then you try to explain that transcendental position. Once that's understood, then you can come down into practical application of the position. But you'll use a position to describe the principle. But you have to, like you're saying, find what works for them. That is the key in preaching, is what medium you're using. So Vyasadeva is describing all these mediums. But because they're being described so nicely in detail, people will get lost.
So how would you use it, for example, in cooking? How would you sort of do the detail of cooking, but here this is about Krishna?
Because the result will be for Krishna. So because we want to please Krishna as a person, so then one of the ways that we can do, so we want to express our affection for Krishna. That's the main thing. So then how to do that? So we have an opportunity, we can do that through cooking for him. So now in cooking for him, now there's the detail of cooking. So since the result is for him, we want a good result, so therefore we want to use good technique. Right? And so that knowledge and technique and all that is quite expansive. So our use of it is simply because it gives a nice result for Krishna. So we're paying attention to that, but at the same time as the intent, it's always for Krishna. So as far as knowledge and skill, you're focused on application of the cooking technique. But in intent, it's all about pleasing Krishna. Because we can do those all at once. Right? So that's the thing, is the relationship, the attitude, the technique, the results, all that. We may be moving back and forth on various aspects. But the point is that's the field you're moving in. But it's about pure love for Krishna.
So what you're saying is we often get lost in the detail of cooking.
Yes.
Salt goes in after that,
Yes, yes.
You get all involved and the pot's got to be this hot.
Yes, yes. But as long as ultimately it's for Krishna, it's still counted as devotional service with the intent of developing prema.
So as a neophyte, when you're learning,
Yes.
and you do get caught up in
Yes.
detail,
Yes.
as long as there's that intent, I'm trying to please Krishna,
Mm-hmm.
this is Krishna.
Yes.
People get lost and you get
Yes.
distracted, but there's still progress.
Yes, there's still progress. So what he's mentioning here, it's the same, the mechanics are the same with the devotee and the non-devotees. It's just that the non-devotees don't know about Bhagavatam. So they can't discern all these varieties of methods and techniques. They think that that's actually the substance. So someone's worshiping demigods, someone's doing, their mystic yoga, someone's into gyan, someone's just doing their karma. And so all these different things are there, and they're missing the point. While the devotees know it's about pleasing Krishna, and then according to your situation, then you're applying these different religious principles to please Krishna. Does that make sense?
That's why it's bewildering to the living entity if they don't know that. Because there's so much.
Yes, there's so much.
You get lost in.
So much, yeah. So that's why then connecting them to Krishna, that's the important thing. So they understand actually what you're trying to do. And if that's appreciated, then, because you see Prabhupada's giving all these different aspects. They're all one thing, but at the same time, as you see, is that it's different aspects of one thing. So it appears that he's just saying a sentence, but this sentence has all these particular things. So therefore he's saying, here, he starts back here. The most defective part of worshiping demigods is that it creates a definite conception of pantheism ending disastrously in many religious sects, detrimental to the progress of the principles of the Bhagavatam. Right? So the principles of the Bhagavatam, it's all about Krishna. It's not about the demigods. Right? The demigods are involved in the process of service to Krishna. And so it's not that they're not involved in the overall picture, but there's no pantheistic concept because they're not separate from the Lord. They're just acting as instruments or agents on behalf of the Lord.
So in the Bhagavatam story, were the villagers, were they pantheistic or they just were getting involved in that Krishna said no?
Because they're, just as tradition, they're worshiping Indra so that they get proper rain, so that then the grass and the crops grow, so that they and the cows and all that are prosperous. So it's just that's the mechanics of how the universe is structured. So then they're just taking part in that. But they're not really focusing that it's the Lord that is the one that they're acting on behalf of. So that's not so strong. But even that, it doesn't matter because they're all absorbed in Krishna and they're just doing this out of, just, I forget what's the term. Just means that, yeah, it's like ritual, but that you're just performing it out of habit or something like that. Matter of course, I think. They're just, it's just what's going on. It's just that time of year again. So, but, and it can go on because they're not going to be distracted from their affection for Krishna. But, how do you say, we may be, and Indra definitely is. And so because of Indra's pride, therefore Krishna is then specifically gone here. And it's correct in what's going, because the point is the Indra-ness of Indra is coming from Krishna, not from that jiva who's playing the part, the position. It's just like you have a man on the street. Then people vote, and now he's the prime minister. Did he create that potency and power and post? No, it's already there. And he happens to take that up. Being in that position, he becomes empowered with that. And then the day that someone else is elected to the post, he becomes just another person again. So, but what happens is the tendency is, as we see with Indra and living entities, is when they're in the post, they think they are the post. It is them. They're the one that's doing everything. Well, no, it's the post that's doing. The potency is already there. Then they get to take part as an instrument to see that that's going nicely. Because the post is there for doing a specific thing. In this case, for Indra, then proper, how you say, administration of the universal affairs so that everything goes nicely. But if he thinks he's the one doing that, no, it's the post is the one that's there, and he gets to take part in that. Right? Because otherwise the Lord could do it all himself, then what would we do? We'd all be sitting around, twiddling our thumbs if we had thumbs. Right? Is that, yeah. So the idea is that he's pointing out, without the understanding of the principles of the Bhagavatam, you can't, decipher what the Vedic literatures are describing. Right? You may be able to understand them for the cultural and religious and economic values like this, and be able to apply them for your day-to-day life, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. That you can do, but you won't be able to understand them in connection with Krishna, right? Because we said liberation means there's self-realization, but the point is and so all of these religious processes are to bring you to that platform, but they're only on that platform so that you can serve Krishna from that platform. Yes, but they think that's the goal, that's the end, that self-realization is the end. It would be just like one is outside on the street, and then one wants to come into the temple to get away from being on the street, because it's chaos, so you come into the temple. So you've shifted from a material situation to a spiritual situation, right? So now, for the impersonalists, then just being in the temple, that's enough. They're not going to do anything in the temple. They're just going to exist in the temple. You understand? So their goal is just existing in the temple. While for the devotees, being in the temple or existing in the temple is for the purpose of doing service. So for us, getting to that position of being in the temple is so that then we could render service to Krishna. Does that make sense? So that's why for the devotees, liberation is only situational. It's not a goal. But for the impersonalists, it's their goal. So for them, it's a big deal. For us, it's just, that's where you have to do things. It's just like to cook, you have to be in the kitchen. It's not like it's the ultimate goal to be in the kitchen and all that. And yeah. It's very simple. It's you're trying to situate yourself on the spiritual platform, because that's the platform that it all happens at. It means Krishna is transcendental, so therefore his Dham, his associates, paraphernalia, everything's transcendental. So being on the transcendental platform, now you can take part in the pastimes. Yes, yes. Yes, yes. Yes, that's it. It is atheistic, but in one sense we will call it, in the generic sense, it means their philosophy is atheistic because they leave the Lord out, but the religious processes they use, they will call them theistic because they're accepting the scriptures. So they're accepting some supreme authority. So in that way it's theistic, as opposed to, let's say, non-Vedic aspects or non-religious aspects where the authority for what you do is actually atheistic, because it's just a group of people decide this is what's right. Yeah, anarchy, but even if it's organized, it's just like, you say you have a society of people and they've decided that, drinking alcohol is all right, but smoking marijuana is not. But who defines this? They've defined this. And then and then you have to be 21, you can drink, or like this and that and like that, and and then with time they just adjust these around. So then they'll lower the age of drinking to 18, or they'll make marijuana legal, or these different things. And does that make sense? So they just create their own rules on it. Smoking's all right, or now smoking's looked down upon. But who's defining it? Just they're defining it. And you can say, no, but these are all good in that. They're only good because they define it as good. The next day they can define it not as good. Today it seems so crystal clear that yes, this is right, but then something comes up, a new study or something happens, and then it completely changes the whole flavor. So that's atheistic because it's not based on theism that there's God's laws. So those who accept a religious process and say we have to, follow God's, direction and all, then you can say that's theistic. But just it's not necessarily very developed unless it's based on the Vedas. Because the amount of knowledge is just like we see, some scriptures, they describe creation and you get 1 1/3 pages. So principle is there, but so much of the detail is not. Well, you see in Bhagavatam, it'll describe the creation 3 different times, giving different details. That it's huge volumes of information. So it's just a matter of how developed. But the principle that there's laws given by the Lord and you follow that, that's theistic. So here, even the impersonalists are following that as the religious process. So they study the scriptures, they perform their duties, they're austere, they do all these different things. They're detached, but they don't believe in the eternal form of the Lord. So in that way, then we say they're atheists. So in other words, on the religious platform it's theistic, but on the philosophical it's atheistic. Yeah, because they're 2 different... Yeah, but because what we see here is that Bhagavatam showing these distinctions, otherwise we won't know. Because we see devotional service and transcendental love, we'll say they're exactly the same. And if they're done at the proper consciousness, they are. But at the same time, is there 2 features. It's like I'm offering the lunch offering to Krishna. I'm cooking to offer to Krishna. So it's one thing, but at the same time, the technique of offering and the technique of cooking is 2 different things. And that I'm doing these technical points and I'm doing devotion for Krishna is 2 different things. Because otherwise, smartas are also cooking properly according to the rules, offering it to Krishna. But their intent is liberation or the heavenly planets. So it's not called, we don't call it devotional service, though they have to perform devotional service to get the result they want. That's why we say no one can get any benefit without devotional service. But it's the intent that defines it for us as devotional service. So in other words, all religious activities are to be used in the service of the Lord. So they're meant for devotional service. But if you don't use them for devotional service, then they're called piety. Or religious processes. Does that make sense?
So all those activities are pious activities.
Yes, but so all activities of devotional service are pious activities, because those are the activities that are meant for using in Krishna's service. So devotees use them that way, and for them there's a non-difference. That's why it's devotional service. There's the devotion and there's the service, right? And our intent is transcendental love, not karma and jnana, right? Because the materialists, then they'll perform devotional service with the intent of karma and jnana. So it's not technically devotional service, though mechanically it is, but it's technically not because its intent is not transcendental love. So that's why you see Prabhupada gives all these points to make sure it's exactly understood, because that's what this chapter is about. Is how exactly it's not going to give the result of prema. So you have to break it all down. And then we see the Bhagavatam that goes through and explaining all this. Does that make sense? Yeah. Huh?
So understanding the mechanics of devotional service, the joy of understanding mechanics.
Right.
Inferior to learning into the purpose of better quality. Get enamored about.
Yeah, you could say, but at the same time is that even that better quality of service, but why do you want better quality? Right? It means we're impressed by the mechanics because we appreciate the knowledge and the logic and just that kind of the scientific aspect of it, that substance. But then application of that is better. But why are you applying? To please Krishna. So that's why it has to end with that transcendental love. But you require all three. The expression is going to have all three. And it's just a matter of where. So in the beginning, if it's in the knowledge or in the activity, it means you start with knowledge and then you start to see the importance of application, or you're starting with application, then you see the benefit of knowledge. But both have to get to the point that it's about love for Krishna. Because when you have love for Krishna, you want to express that through the activity. That requires the knowledge. So then you have, that would be what we're talking about, the Icha, Kriya, and Jnana Shaktis. So that knowledge of it and how it works and all that and how perfect it is, that's the Jnana Shakti. That is application so that it produces results that can be offered to Krishna, that's the Kriya Shakti. But that the result is being offered in pure love, that's the Icha. Because Krishna is the Kriya and Jnana. So for him, it's the devotional aspect that is important. That's what pleases him. Does that make sense? So these distinctions, these fine distinctions are made. So, and if we appreciate the fine distinctions within the Jnana aspect, the same principle will appreciate that there's knowledge and application. And the distinction. We'll also appreciate the distinction that the attitude and that mood of affection, that is why one is doing it. Yes, it's the inspiration, because the knowledge is going on with the activity and that attitude, because they all go together. So it's one thing, but it has three parts. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. So it's just a continuation of that. And then that taste that is there in that affection for the Lord, that will be greater than the taste of the knowledge. Not that that taste and the knowledge goes away. It just becomes, you could say, eclipsed by the depth of affection for the Lord. Does that make sense? So it's not that it becomes less, but in comparison it seems like, because the other one is so great. So when we're talking about, the material oceans reduced to the size of a calf's hoof print, because of that devotional and that surrender to Krishna and the spiritual master, then that is the position, because devotional service is so much greater that the material world is like the calf's hoof print. But then within that size of the calf's hoof print, for those who are materialistic, it still seems like an ocean. It's like the whole civilization functioning in the, the bus station locker. Like that, So that's it, is that we have, sometimes you have it, I think once they saw, you had this thing and then you had something going on and then they pull back, and there's someone wondering about the greatness of things and they pull back and then you see the world and then you pull back more and then you see some old guy sitting in this chair, and there's this little, earth sitting on his head, and it pulls back more, and then there's this other, older, frumpy lady with a fly swatter. And she's saying, hold still, I'll get it. He's got this earth, going, no, hold on, I'll get you. So for us, everything's so great, and then it goes back, and then, this. So the whole idea is that for the materialist, it still is, but for the devotee, because of that focus on Krishna and Guru and service to Krishna, the material becomes reduced down to that, because that's all the bigger it is in comparison to the unlimited ocean of bhakti. So it's not that it actually, in one sense, it just comes into its natural position. So that's why you see the Goswamis that when in the performance of their duties in the Lord's pastimes, they're doing all these nice things. But it's going on very smoothly, and the personal interaction and the affection is very great. But when they come here to preach, then you see the volume of knowledge and the technicalness that they can get into is so great. So the jnana shakti is still there, but it's just that the icha becomes, it's the prominent. That's the main thing. So the absorption is there. Not that you don't know the other things.
But if one hasn't developed that sense of connection,
Right. Yes, no, it'll be there, but the point is the connection with Krishna, that's what makes it perfect. Right? So as soon as something's connected with Krishna, it becomes perfect. Right? Then you apply it in Krishna's service, it becomes more perfect. And then when it's done to please Krishna, that's the most perfect. So it's all already perfect. It's already on the transcendental platform. It's already in connection with devotional service. So that's why then this whole idea, if it's connected with the principles of Bhagavatam, then it's within actually the aspect of perfection. Well, if it's not within the principles of Bhagavatam, then you will have the thing called perfection or liberation, but it's not actually perfection because it's temporary. Yeah, it's a little p, perfection. Yes, well, this is the big P, yeah. So that's then what's being done. That's why sometimes it becomes confusing because the words can be used to express so many things. And we'll get stuck by the secondary of a particular word means exactly a particular thing. No, it's a medium through which. It's just like a frying pan can cook so many things. It's just, if you go into the kitchen and someone's cooking some cauliflowers in the frying pan instead of potatoes, it's like, what? Is that possible? No, it's a principle. So the words, they deal with these certain principles, and then you apply them according to the situation. But we get distracted by the words. That's how much of the time misunderstandings and arguments come up, is that I define the word in one way, someone else defines it in another. And then we argue over that definition. While we think that we're arguing two different things, well, actually we may be discussing the same thing. I would just use a different word to say that. But otherwise, the point they're making, I totally agree with if I use this word. Right? And for them, it's that, if they're saying what we're saying, but they would use a different word again. And so then we fight over the secondary. Instead of seeing, well, what's the intent? What's actually trying to be defined here? Does that make sense? So that always comes up, like freedom of speech. What does that mean? That means I can say anything anywhere? Because if we're talking about freedom of speech, then it should be while they're having the Senate is there, some guy can just stand up and start singing, just because he feels like it. That's freedom of speech. But the point is freedom of speech is defining an intent. Right? The intent is if someone, a thoughtful person, has something to say about, a religious or philosophical or political or economic or social or personal situation that they feel would be valuable in the lives of others for the overall cooperation of the state, the personal development and the development of the state, they should be allowed to speak that. It shouldn't be they can't speak it because one group thinks they know everything. That's the intent. Not that the guy can use all the curse words he wants in a rap song and that's freedom of speech. You know what I'm saying? That's just taking the words literally. You're not taking the intent of why, the founding fathers will say these things. So that's the whole point, is the law is made for a particular intent. But then the problem is it's documented in the words, and with time people don't necessarily know. That's why then the importance of where is that coming from? What they call precedent. Because then is that this is what's going on, this is the thing, then you interpret it according to that. But even that is probably not known, it's just used as an argument. It's not actually, the intent of the precedent is not trying to be seen. You know what I'm saying? So that's the difficulty, is that these religious processes will just see the secondary form of them and then take that as the substance, when they're there as for the purpose of expressing the intent of transcendental love for Krishna. So that's the thing that Narad Muni is pointing out that is not being done. Vyasadeva has missed that point. Not that he doesn't know it, but his presentation doesn't account for that people get bewildered. So as a transcendental, as a Paramahamsa, then if he looks at it, he'll always see it in connection to Krishna. But he has to understand, as those who are reading it, they won't see it that way. So the direct explanation has to be given. That's Srimad Bhagvatam. Then, looking at any Vedic literature from that position of Bhagavatam, then you can see its actual, how it's supposed to be applied. Right? You know, the Vedic literatures, any, and that means any variety from the transcendental down to the, mundane and the arts and all these different things. Everything, if it's seen from that perspective of Bhagavatam, then it takes on its natural position. Right? Then it can become devotional service.
So, like what you're saying, if you're looking from the bottom up and you don't know about Krishna, it's just confusing.
Yes.
If you know about it, you can be placed wherever you are.
Yes.
The whole knowledge system that you're involved in
Yes.
makes sense.
Because then it is transparent. When you have Krishna and the parampara, then the knowledge that you're looking through is also transparent, so you can see Krishna. But if one's not coming in the parampara, one's not seeing it in connection to Krishna, then the methods you are using, or in this case the religious processes, then they're not transparent for you. And so they're clouding, and so you see that as the end. So, to follow my duties and all that, or to be renounced, or to be a scholar and have knowledge, or to give in charity, like Karna, to give in charity. No one was giving more charity at the time than him. Right? But the point is that he doesn't actually know what it's for. Right? So he becomes distracted by that, because charity is to serve Krishna. He's not serving Krishna. Right? So that's the point, is that he's distracted by that. So that's something. Yeah.
I mean, you get that now these days, like people in banks, etc. They give huge amounts of charity.
Yes.
Well, but it's not for Krishna.
No, so it's just for being good, being nice, because that's the goal. I should be a nice person. That's the whole thing is, I should be a nice person. I've gotten all this money, I've benefited from all this, so I should be nice and try to help others and all that kind of thing. Which is good. It's a step up from just, being about yourself. But it's still not about Krishna. You're seeing the religious function, but not seeing it in connection with Krishna. So it's theistic in that you're accepting these. In this case, it wouldn't be, but I'm saying if you accept the Vedic literature, it's theistic. But in this case, it's the thing to do. Now, whether they as a person feel that that's what should be done because it's God's creation and therefore you're getting you should share the bounty of God's, gifts like this, then yes, then it has that theistic aspect. But to do that to please God as a person, that's not being taken all the way through. God is the lawgiver. I follow God's laws, so then I'm a good citizen. Yes, you are. But that doesn't mean you have a personal relationship with God. It means you're a good person. But the Vedic idea, the actual what Krishna is doing, everything is to develop, each individual can develop a personal relationship with Krishna. Right? That's then what they're trying to do. So it's a very subtle point, but it's very important, because it means the difference between pure devotion, mixed devotion, or piety. Right? Because the religious principles are being followed by all of them. But it's just the intent in pure devotion is just to please Krishna. In mixed devotion, it's, please Krishna, please ourselves. And in piety, it's just to please yourself. It may be the medium of pleasing others to please yourself, but it ultimately is going to end up back with yourself. Set. Yeah. Good? All this? Okay. Yeah. So that means the objects you're using can distract you. That's why then means even in the ingredients, there's qualities of the ingredients. So those recommended by Scripture, the pious ingredients, are going to create less of a disturbance than impious ingredients. Right? That was, last night's discussion. Right? So the impious ingredients, if you're connecting them to Krishna, the connection is made and that devotional aspect is there. But because the quality of the ingredient is inferior, it will cause more disturbance than if you're using a quality ingredient, which is religion. Right? Does that make sense? So that's the whole idea, is you're trying to use the best quality of things, but because the mind will be the most peaceful, because that will be in goodness, right? Well, if you're using impious, that means it's passion and ignorance. So it won't be as good an offering. The mind will be more distracted. And a distracted mind, it may be you're less thinking of Krishna. So that's why then we'll use the recommended religious activities as given in the Scriptures. But even you're using the religious, if it's not being done to please Krishna, it still is inferior. Right? So it's not that, yes, it's inferior, but still it's better than the other one. Yeah, that's there, but still you have to know what the actual thing is, the real position. Otherwise, we're getting distracted by the object that disturbed condition of the selection of object. So what it is we've selected, say justice or, charity, being nice, or being a good student, being a good, academic. Whatever we've selected, we get bewildered by that because of the distraction. Right? Does that make sense? So it's just a matter of, if we're looking at it not connected to Krishna, it's all a distraction. Whether it's in goodness, passion, or ignorance, it's all distraction. It's just a matter of whether you're bound to the material world by a gold chain, a silver chain, or an iron chain. That's basically, the modes will bind you. You will be bound. And I'm sure if you had a prison and all the, prisoners had their ball and chain, the guys with a solid gold ball and chain would be feeling themselves superior to the ones that have the silver ones and the iron ones. And the silver ones you'll talk to, the iron ones you just have nothing to do with. What the point is they're still all have a ball and chain. So that's why, even though we'll glorify the proper use of the religious activities, if it's not connected to Krishna, we'll still say it's a waste of time. Right? So that's why it becomes bewildering sometimes. Well, do we support all these nice things or not? We do in connection with Krishna. And if they're not, then they're a waste of time for a devotee. If you're not a devotee, better you're following all the religious principles. Right? Because then at least the material manifestation will go on smoothly. Your disturbed mind will be in a peace. You'll be disturbed within a pleasant condition. It's like the difference on whether you're in a 5-star hotel, suite, and your mind's disturbed, or you're in some funky little cockroach motel and your mind is disturbed. Right? Does that make sense? So, that's the thing. You're disturbed and there's more disturbing stuff. The other one is disturbed, but it's a more peaceful environment. So that's all the difference between pious and impious. Is just where you situate. Now, if you're going to be engaged in Krishna service, then that nicer situation is nicer. It's clean, it's big, it's open, it's airy, it's light. So to set up the deities and do your worship there and chant your japa is going to be so much easier than in the cockroach hotel. Because where do you put the you don't want to touch anything in there, let alone get out the deities and do your worship. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's not recommended, because it's not a nice situation for doing service. But if that's where you are, you can still remember Krishna, chant Krishna and still be engaged in service. Does that make sense? But if you want to start developing, expanding your service, you wouldn't choose that one. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this? Yes.
When we connect the object to Krishna, to what degree does it affect karma?
Karma. What?
The
Yes.
In what sense, maybe the question is, what sense are they distracting?
Because we get involved in the secondary aspect instead of the primary. Right? So from the karmis, it's something that's blocking them from coming up because they see that as a goal. For the devotees, it's a situation they're in, but they're too much focusing on the situation instead of forward to Krishna. Situations, it's just like if we're just in the temple and looking at things in the temple and getting into this and that, we don't notice the deities. You know what I'm saying? So we're too distracted by that. So you want to create a situation which we're not so distracted. You know, so we're aware that it's Krishna's temple room, so therefore in Krishna's temple room, we do things that would please Krishna. So we chant, we do kirtan, we, discuss about, Srimad Bhagvatam and, does that make sense? Take Charanamrita, worship Tulsi, all these different things. But they're all connected to Krishna. You understand? But if we sit in here and discuss just about the architectural aspect like that and are not thinking about its application in Krishna's service, then you're distracted from that. Though it may be a better distraction than something else. So, in some sense, yeah. Okay. Something else? Yes. Yes, yes. Right. Right. But they're connected to Krishna, so then that means the soul is acting in its natural position. Right? So the soul acting its natural position, then those qualities that they're endeavoring for, those will be qualities of the soul. While the materialists, they don't know the Krishna, they don't know the soul. So then the qualities they're manifesting are simply there by the previous activities, the karma, that now in this life they have some good activity, good character. And they use that properly, that can be maintained. They don't, they use it not properly, then they'll lose it. So that's why we say they don't have any good qualities, because they don't properly deal with the qualities they have, then they'll lose them. It's like anything. You have money, you don't deal properly, it'll go away. You have a house, you don't deal with it properly, it'll fall apart. Does that make sense? Yeah. It means as they go on, yes, they'll develop all that. So they may start with, they have, let's say, a nicer conditioned nature. That's why they're nicer when they come. But they're using it for Krishna, so that will be, they'll be developing that as their own character, not just from the conditioning. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Something else? No?
Just to go back to this hard and soft preaching, if the intent is there to please Krishna, then
Yes.
even if there's another,
That's what makes it preaching. See, when we're saying soft or hard, actually what's happening is we're focusing on the secondary, on the religious aspect. So hard preaching would be a traditional religious situation and activities and understanding that has to be there, otherwise it's not devotional service. That's hard preaching. That makes the devotional service. Soft preaching is people aren't from that background, so we can't say all these things. So therefore, we're going to use either, we'll use some quasi aspect that they're accepting within their culture, like yoga or astrology or Ayurveda or Vastu like this, that are actually Vedic things, but they're accepted within the modern culture, not from their Vedic origins or perspective or that. It's just part of the New Agey kind of situation. So then we'll go with that religious process. But in either case, the focus is not on Krishna. You understand? So that's why we're making the distinction of hard and soft. One is, it's niyamagraha, right? Soft preaching means you reject the rules because you don't understand them. Hard preaching means you accept the rules, but you don't know what they're for. Right? So in either case, both don't understand what the rules are for. One accepts them and thinks that's everything, the rules, and the other one rejects them and thinks that that's what, in other words, I accepted the rules, that's the dynamic aspect of devotional service. The other one is I rejected them and I'm just taking the essence. But if you reject those, then how would you know what the essence is? Right? Yeah.
But you can transform them both by
Yes. So then there's no problem, because the point is if you're bringing Krishna into it, then you'll see someone who's using a very pleasant approach may be appreciated, but you also see someone who uses a very strong or bold approach. If it's about Krishna, it's appreciated. We'll say, no, it's only soft, but nowadays you get people up there and fiery and yelling and screaming, and people appreciate it and follow them. So if it's all just about being soft and like this, then why are people liking this? At the same time, you see someone else speaks very nicely and pleasantly, and people appreciate that. So if you're into the political platform and they're either jumping up and down about the political platform with conviction, or they're speaking very nicely with conviction, you like either one of them. But the point is, if they have conviction on that political platform. That's why then it's appreciated. Or on the economic platform, some talk very freely and nicely about, you have to do this or that in business, this is important. Someone else says, if you don't do this, it's not happening, and this, but they have that conviction. So either they both work, and they may be appreciated by one group or the other, but generally everybody will appreciate conviction. Though you may prefer one approach or another, but or at least today, tomorrow you may get want some change. But so it's when it's about Krishna, and it's about pleasing Krishna, that's where it becomes useful. That's why it works. So you can say, this doesn't work, then why is it thousands of devotees came by the hard preaching? And when we go into the soft preaching, we see not necessarily as many are there. Or if we're talking about that there's a volume, but what about the conviction of those individuals? Well, before they came in with the heart, they were convinced, though they may also have not known what's the higher level. But when you're using the soft, they don't know either. Plus, they don't have a lifestyle. So at least the one, you have a lifestyle, though you don't actually fully understand what it's for. And the other one, you don't know what it's for, and you don't have a lifestyle. You just have some good feelings, So that's the point is until it goes through to Krishna, that's then where it has the point, But of the two, one that supports tradition is better than one that opposes tradition. Because tradition is pious, it's religious. So to be irreligious is never considered a good situation. Even though you may intellectualize it and try to put it in nice words and make it sound really fabulous, it's still a bad position. It's like we give the example of ethnic cleansing. Sounds really, good, because it's, ethnicity is a nice thing like that, and cleansing, keeping things clean is really good. So it has some potential here. But it's just fancy words. It doesn't actually mean that. So that's the whole point, is just because we take the lack of acceptance of authority, and therefore we don't accept tradition, we don't accept the scriptures, we don't accept any of this thing, but just because we put it into nice language doesn't make us any more theistic.